Hi friends, today we are going to discuss on some important postmodern critical theories. Postmodernism and critical theory are broad rubrics for intellectual movements rather than specific theories. They are essential parts of social semiotic analysis. Post-structuralism and deconstruction, which were initially intellectual and critical reactions against structuralism of 1960s, paved the way for the rise of postmodernism. Neo-Marxism and feminism influenced the postmodern critical theory. Postmodernism has made common cause with new critical theories embracing post-colonialism, feminist, gay and queer theories. The present rubric for postmodern and critical theory is generally called cultural studies. Postmodernism is a social, political and aesthetic ideology which reflects the cross currents prevailing in the social movement in which we live today. Postmodernism strengthens the concept of knowledge-based society. Knowledge in postmodern society has a utilitarian character. It is also distributed, stored and arranged differently in postmodern societies as compared to modern ones. It synchronizes with the advent of computer technology in 1960s. The computer technology has radically revolutionized the modes of knowledge production, distribution and consumption in postmodern societies. Knowledge has become digitizable. That is, anything that is not digitizable will cease to be knowledge. There is a paradigm shift in the very definition of knowledge. The opposite of knowledge is not ignorance but noise. Anything that is not digitizable is noise and is not recognizable within the system. Different critics have viewed postmodernism differently. To some, it is ingrained in romanticism because in romantic movement or in romantic age, the important poets like Wordsworth, Keats and Shelley wrote poems on ordinary subject and ordinary men. So, postmodernism also rejects the grand narrative and encourages the little narrative such as romanticism. And to others, it is a continuation of modernism, but it has been universally acknowledged that postmodernism has changed our notion of art, literature and culture. Jean-Francois Lyotard. He is a very important postmodern theorist. Jean-Francois Lyotard's book, The Postmodern Condition, is the master text of postmodernism in which he has rejected the beliefs of enlightenment, which means ideas such as reason and progress, which are the basis of modernity. He has used the term grand narrative in this book. In his seminal essay, answering the question, what is postmodernism, Lyotard gives an account of postmodernity which suggests the collapse of grand narrative or meta-narrative and the replacement with little narratives because of the advancement of technologies which altered the notion of knowledge. Lyotard further analyzes Kantian notion of sublime in the same essay. He describes both narrative and non-narrative knowledges as language game. Not because they are frivolous, but because they are bound by rules that players agree to follow. Language games are also agonistic. To speak is to fight. Examples of language moves include prescriptive utterances such as rules and recommendations and denotative utterances such as truth claims. In postmodernity, language springs from linguistics and communicative practices of researchers engaged in language games that generate little narratives, which means rejecting grand narratives favors mini narratives, stories that explain small practices, local events rather than large-scale universal or global concepts. Postmodern mini narratives are always situations, provisionals, contingent, and temporary, making no claims to universality, truth, reason, or stability. For postmodern society, there is only surface without depth, only signifiers, no signified. Apart from suggesting the collapse of grand narratives and their replacement by little narratives, the shifting of emphasis from knowledge to information. Lyotard considers postmodernism as part of modernism. Postmodernism then is a critique of grand narratives, the awareness that such narratives serve to mask the contradictions and instabilities that are inherent in any social organization or practices. The next important postmodern theorist is Jean Bodylord. Jean Bodylord, a postmodernist who studies contemporary popular culture, says that commodities, that is the stuff you buy, are all signifiers. Signifiers are representations of words, symbols, pictures, etc. that point to something beyond outside of themselves, something which has a reality of its own, regardless of how it is represented. In the world of mass media, which Bodylord studies, however, there is no signified, no reality, no level of simple existence to which signifiers refer. Rather, he says, there are only signifiers with no signified. There are only pictures of chairs without any real chairs ever being referred to or existing. He calls this separation of signifier from signified a simulacrum, a representation without an original that it copies. Simulacra, the plural of simulacrum, don't mirror or reproduce or imitate or copy reality. They are reality itself, says Bodylord. Hence, to him, identity is thus a product of the signifiers. Selfhood for himself, as for Lacan, is thus always already an alienated position, something defined by external. His work, Simulacrum, concerns with what he calls the culture of hyper-reality. That is, model replace the determine the real. For him, Disneyland becomes America. Hyper-reality is everyday reality. In the postmodern world of mass media, however, the original largely disappears and only copies exist. An example of this is music CD. There is no original master version of any music CD, but only thousands and thousands of copies, all identical and all equal in value. Mass mediated forms of communication in postmodern culture revolve around this idea of simulacra or imitation or copies with no original. The simulacra forever being projected at viewers by the mass media provided with Bodylord calls codes and models. Human in the postmodern culture occupies passive subject positions within these codes and models. A simulacrum creates a passive subject who takes the simulation as a only necessary reality. Say for example, a kid playing a race car video game who then gets behind the wheel of a real car may not be able to tell the difference between the two experiences of driving. The lack of distinction between game and reality is another feature of postmodern culture. The very important thinkers of postmodernism are Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari. Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari are the author of number of different works explain postmodern ideas. In Anti-Oedipus, they deconstruct and rework Freud's ideas about formation of the self and the psyche and the unconsciousness. In the essay A Thousand Plateaus, they present the concept of the rhizome as the basic structure in postmodern world. They throw out the model of the tree and replace it with a model of fungus, that is a rhizome. This, according to Deleuze and Guattari, is how all humanity or enlightenment of Western thought has worked, and how all art and literature from the humanist culture has operated. A rhizome is an organism which consists of interconnected living fibers, but with no central point, no particular origin, no definitive structure, no formative unity. A rhizome does not start from anywhere and end anywhere. At every point in its existence, it is the same, a network of individual but indistinguishable threads. A rhizome is much harder to uproot. An example is crabgrass, which continues to survive no matter how much of it you pull up, since no part is the governing part of the organism. Another good example of rhizomatic structure is internet, that is the www, World Wide Web. It has no center, there is no place that starts it, controls it, monitors it or ends it. Rather, the www is the interconnection of all the zillions of websites that exist, that is, which exist only in hyperreality, only in digital form, only as images on your computer screen and not in any material form. Take away the individual website out and the web still exists without any impairment of functioning. Say for example, take out Yahoo and Google or even Microsoft, the web will still exist and will still work the same way. Deleuze and Guattari argue that stories, narratives, literature operate like either a tree structure or a root structure. Tree structure stories have a beginning, middle and an end. They have a linear progression and tell a story about growth, about achievement, about upwardness. Tree narratives make the statement to be continually talking about what is, what becomes, what will be and what was. Rhizome stories, narratives, literature on the other hand, do not have these delimited starting and ending points. They are about a maze of surfaces, connections rather than about depth and height. They make the statement and rather than to be, as they show connections between events and peoples and ideas without necessarily offering any causative explanations or direction for those connections. Rhizomatic narratives offer what Deleuze and Guattari call lines of flight and strategies of deterritorialization rather than maps of a territory or terrain. So, in the postmodern narrative or in a rhizomatic narrative, there is no ending, no conclusion. The writing just stops. Thank you very much.